But as a progressive thinking retail investors, I like to think of NIO not only as a car company and also evaluate them not just by the standards and benchmarks of the auto industry, but actually look beyond that. And I do think next week could already be decisive for NIO's share price, as we're currently in this wedge pattern here with a stronger support that is increasing, but also with the resistance line at $15 a share. So I think there is a high likelihood actually that investors will be recognizing the intrinsic values of those new innovations, and NIO will start catching up with those inherent values and possibly breaking through this barrier. So let's see what will actually happen next week. Well, what more can I say? And here we are back with a weekly market update where I'm talking about the recent market developments and usually some news associated with stocks that I'm covering here on the channel. And let's make this a NIO episode. So yeah, this pop happened pretty quickly, and we broke through the $15 barrier here, and it immediately took it to the next resistance level here, taking out the $16 a share, and now even rallying above to this new channel trend line here, and well, possibly extending it in today's market. So we see that there was a lot of suppressed power in NIO stock after the sell-off in the earnings call, where I actually popped my champagne bottle because, well, those numbers were exciting for me, and I do think, as I mentioned it before, that was a breakthrough moment for NIO. And well, it took some time until some of the analysts of the banks actually implied this in their ratings of the stock price. And obviously yesterday we did have a big new rating by actually one of the NIO bears that set a new price target. But actually I'm not watching those analysts ratings at all. I also do think those price targets at Yahoo Finance are mostly rubbish, to be honest. And I would even take this recent analyst upgrade with a pinch of salt, because at the same time as he was upgrading NIO by a whopping 1,500%, he was also putting a bullish price target and a buy rating on Li Auto, and I have been covering them before on my channel here. I would still be very cautious as a retail investor in investing in Li Auto, and if you are invested, I don't really want to tell you what to do, but you may want to rethink twice and consider selling now if you can take some profits in there, because actually one of the news is that Li Auto will be now running out of the pre-sales that they have lined up. So now in the next few weeks we will see actually what is the real demand and not only the pent-up demands. In general, I don't want to sound like a short seller here because I'm really not, but just my honest opinion here. But anyways, back to NIO and my Patreon supporters. First of all, thank you guys so much for your support, and in this episode I want to dive a little bit more into some of the conversations that we're having on Patreon, and also the one-on-one questions that I'm getting sent over there. And yesterday I already made a quick post on my Patreon channel in order to, of course, celebrate with our community and with the NIO gang here that the stock price is finally rising, because we should be happy about that, of course. But at the same time, I'm preparing my Patreons for the fact that this could well also come back and maybe dropping back to the $15 range if the markets in general are dropping. So let's take a quick look at the overall markets before we get back to NIO, and we can see that we are now in the very middle of this channel in which the Nasdaq is trading. So in my views, we're not yet like overextended in the markets. It could still run up, although we had really couple of great days in the last couple of days, but anyways, we could see a little bit of a correction, but it doesn't really looks like it's imminent right now. Today in the morning we had news that the Fed is keeping the rates low for maybe even 5 years, so I don't think there's really any alternative to put your money right now instead of the stock markets. And in my point of view, this bull market will continue for some while. And because of that, also maybe the rally in NIO may continue for a couple of days until we see a more major correction. And that correction, of course, could be quite big at that time. So usually it's always that after a huge spike, we also see bigger corrections, and then possibly some of the weaker hands are getting shaken out. But speaking of holding versus selling, I ran a quick poll yesterday, and thank you guys for participating in this poll, which showed that 90% of the participants and channel watchers are actually looking to hold NIO long term. And this is really what this channel is all about, because, well, I always preach to not look too much on those short-term trends. I couldn't care less, actually, if NIO was down 10% today. The problem is rather to look at the longer picture and stay invested for a longer time. This is my personal views, and this is also despite the fact that such kind of technical trades with like now breaking this barrier of $15 a share, and it may be obvious that at some point of time we get a correction with NIO. I'm not trying to actually take some profits at the highs here and try and get back into it cheaper. I'm always on the views that whenever there's a dip, it's actually the better thing to do to accumulate more. I had many comments down when the stock market crashed about why I'm not selling my Tesla shares and why I'm accumulating more. And also a couple of comments back then and on NIO when it did the first rally, people were selling at $13 a share, and it's super hard to time the markets. And I believe some of those viewers are actually missing out on one of those biggest opportunities to make a really, really big impact on their personal financials, because it's really hard to get back into the shares if they are continuing to rise. And that way they may have missed out on one of the biggest opportunities to double, triple, or even 10x their money. Okay, so let's jump into a couple of individual questions that I'm receiving on Patreon. And well, Dave here, he was asking me about the projections of battery swapping stations in China. And I'm actually doing a couple of research here. And I'm actually looking who is actually jumping onto the battery swapping bandwagon. I'm actually seeing a couple of Chinese companies jumping onto it, for instance, SAIC, which is also partner of VW. And so it's interesting to see this development, and also some other companies who are actually together with the Chinese government investing in this technology. And I've seen some numbers floating around as much as 5,000 battery swapping stations. However, I need to continue and verify that, and I will be posting videos on that once I've got more information. Then I got a really interesting question by Pavel, which is, by the way, a lifetime supporter of Patreon, so I'm super thankful for that. And he was asking kind of about the competitiveness of EVs in general towards gasoline cars in a way, because he was a little bit worried about the prices of energy and electricity, for instance, in Europe, in the Czech Republic, and also here in Germany, for instance. Charging of electric vehicles can be quite expensive, actually. And so he was worried, like, are these EVs really competitive against ICE cars in a way? But I can tell you that in China, electricity is super cheap. The charging rates are very, very inexpensive, largely due to the fact that China is mainly getting its electricity from nuclear power, as well as, unfortunately, coal power. But this energy mix is quite cheap, and in general their energy sector might be much more competitive on an international scale than, for instance, Germany's. So yeah, these cars will just keep on being very competitive with the charging and the refueling in that regard. And I do think, like, even with renewables, that trend will continue, as well as if we are looking at the decreasing cost of batteries, which is the main underlying feature why EVs are the future, and also why I'm bearish on Li Auto as a startup that is not 100% committed to EVs. At the same time, very bullish on Tesla and NIO, who are really inventing the way of bringing EVs forward. Then I got this question by Marcus, who is wondering about the international expansions of NIO. And after the battery as a service announcement, there were some rumors that Li Bin actually mentioned that we still have the global expansion of NIO coming up this year. I've made several comments on that in my previous videos, and I think it doesn't make sense for NIO to expand globally this year. Also, Li Bin, he mentioned it in the earnings call that they will take it more cautious, and it's something for the future to plan. But with the news sources that I'm trusting and that I see reliable and realistic, it's more that like NIO will be aiming and going global in the second half of 2021. And this correlates well with what I'm hearing from Li Bin, and as well as what is my personal views of when it is realistic for NIO to go global. And then a really nice comment by Lex here that I want to feature is that it's hard to believe that the 52-week low was $1.19 for NIO. And I think this is also something that we all should consider, like how far NIO has come, how close they have been actually to insolvency, and also gives you a little bit of a context if you're now asking for $20 US, $25 or $30 US a share. Be more patient with NIO stock. I think it is more healthy if the fundamentals of the company support the rally and not only hyping up, like for instance with Li Auto, what's currently happening there. I'm much more comfortable with that. And speaking of that, I'm really confident in the prospects of NIO and that it has lots of leverages to increase its share price in the future. But this doesn't mean, in my point of view, that it has to happen now. And I'm also not seeing it in relation to what's happening with Li Auto or with Nikola Motors or so on. These companies are possibly blown up by the overall hype around EVs, but I would rather enjoy NIO being a little bit more conservative on that side, because this will also lower your risk of your investment, to be honest. And it gives more people the opportunity to actually hop onto the bandwagon. And I think this is also something really powerful with you guys. This community of people being invested in NIO is super strong. And this is something that I only see from Tesla as well, but now with NIO on top of that. So this is really good news for us in total. Another question that I got from several sites was about a possible dilution of NIO, because there was a SEC filing showing that there were more shares issued. In my reading, it means that this is just a registration of the ADR shares. Something that will happen from time to time, and with the ADR fees on top of that. So nothing to worry about. This is not a additional offering. However, I also want to prepare you for a little bit of bad news, because I do think there is more dilution to be expected from NIO. I mentioned it in my valuation videos previously. I mentioned also that I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. So something you need to take in the consideration of investing in NIO, that you will be at some point diluted as a shareholder. Similar things happen to Tesla. I think this is just how growth companies are working, and you need to consider it with your valuation and your price targets. So I do think in general more and more people are waking up to the big potential of NIO, and I'm hoping to deliver here a couple of insights that make people turn their thinking towards this longer views and stop swing trading it, and also not looking left or right, because this is also one thing that I'm learning here, that actually the winners keep on winning and they will go further and bigger and faster. And actually sometimes it doesn't make sense to invest in XYZ companies if you can just go into one and you have your reward and you understand it perfectly, and then you just stick to that. So yeah, this is just a weekly wrap up of some news, some of your personal questions, my views on the markets. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have got more questions, feel free to post it on Patreon. I may continue to include those questions in the future of the videos as well. And then stay tuned for more videos on topics regarding NIO, but also other stocks, for instance, HMI. I just uploaded it yesterday. Lots of people were not paying attention to my NIO videos when NIO was still down. Now HMI, I think it's an interesting stock to pick. Anyways, I will keep digging up stuff like that, but at the same time, let's focus on NIO, and thank you guys for watching, and see you in the next one.